November 1935, the M130 China Clipper made history as it delivered the first airmail across the Pacific Ocean. The 12,300-kilometer journey from San Francisco to Manila was completed making stops at Honolulu, Midway, Wake, and Guam. The flight brought continents separated by the world's largest ocean closer than ever before. And it also served to underscore the United States' commitment to its Pacific Island holdings and its presence in the Philippines. Regular passenger service across the Pacific was initiated using S-42 and M130 Clippers. Close to 4 years passed before Pan Am finally began flying to Europe. An agreement was reached with Britain, and the first passengers crossed over the Atlantic in the summer of 1939. The route was flown by Pan Am's latest flying boat, the extraordinary Boeing 314 Clipper. No larger commercial aircraft would fly for 30 years. This giant plane had a range of 5,250 kilometers and could carry 74 passengers in fantastic luxury. Providing sleeping berths and a lavish dining room, the 314 Clippers rivaled the comforts of ocean liners and cut travel times to the same destinations by days. After war broke out in 1939, American flying boats would soon prove themselves again in combat. President Franklin Roosevelt ordered the U.S. Navy to extend its patrol of the Atlantic seaboard by an additional 350 kilometers. In doing so, the Navy utilized their existing fleet of consolidated PBY flying boats. The Navy first took delivery of this plane in September 1936. The PBY was a product of the continued development of military flying boats between the wars and would be one of the Navy's greatest assets for years to come. The PBY was over 21 meters long and had a wingspan of 35. This plane soon became one of the most easily recognized aircraft of the Second World War. Due to its versatility and durable construction, Allied forces would flood Consolidated with orders. The British PYBs were soon affectionately called Catalinas. In 1941, the US Navy began to officially use this name in reference to America's own PBYs. A valuable service plane, the PBY also served as a test bed for many new advances in US flying boat technology. The use of retractable wingtip floats reduced drag, and waist blisters provided increased visibility for gunners. This modification greatly increased the gunner's precision in performing an offensive as well as defensive role, and became one of the PBY's most recognizable features. Some models were produced with standard landing gear, permitting operation from runways as well as water. One of the first tasks of American PBY squadrons was to scout out possible base locations in such places as Alaska and the Virgin Islands. These aircraft gave the Navy the strategic capability to fly from San Diego, California to Pearl Harbor within 24 hours. With a top speed of 276 kilometers per hour and a range of over 3,500 kilometers, they had a great advantage over other aircraft of their kind. Armed with torpedoes and depth charges, the PBY was a lethal weapon against enemy subs and surface ships. Combined with a dominant naval and long-range bomber fleet, the PBY gained the upper hand in the battle for control of shipping lanes. Throughout the Pacific War, PBYs were credited with the destruction of many enemy ships, both combat and support vessels, and rescued hundreds of American sailors and airmen from hostile seas. More than once, a Catalina arrived back at a friendly port with literally dozens of rescued men aboard. The Catalina had an incredible ability to withstand punishment, often managing to return to base riddled with bullet holes, large chunks taken out of wings, fuselage, or control surfaces, badly damaged. Its reputation as a dependable and flexible aircraft was well deserved. Another successful consolidated flying boat was the PB-2Y Coronado. This large four-engine plane was completed in December 1937. It could carry an impressive 24,000 kilos and boasted a maximum range of 7,500 kilometers. The PB-2Y was 26 meters long, had a wingspan of 38, and could travel at speeds of up to 345 kilometers an hour. The PB-2Y was updated several times, resulting in faster speeds and the ability to carry a larger load, enhancing its multitude of roles. At a cost of nearly 3 times that of the Catalina, the Coronado would be an expensive acquisition for the Navy. Although only 217 Coronados were built, this plane would prove its worth in many situations throughout the Second World War. One of the Coronado's most important roles was as a bomber, aiding the US in the fight against the Japanese during the Marshall Islands campaign. On another mission, a converted PB-2Y was used to evacuate injured Marines from the bloody battles on Iwo Jima. Outfitted with 25 stretchers, this Coronado became an outstanding hospital ship. Although not as numerous as the Catalina, the Coronado is still remembered as an exceptional aircraft. In 1940, the Navy began receiving the new Martin PBM Mariner, a flying boat intended to compete with Consolidated's legendary PBY. Different versions of this plane were produced as patrol bombers, troop transports, and anti-submarine warfare planes. The Mariners were equipped with self-sealing fuel tanks and over 450 kilos of armor plating. Utilizing the recent British invention of radar, PBMs were credited with sinking as many as 10 submarines during World War II. Martin continued production of the Mariner throughout and after the war, and a total of approximately 1,300 of these planes were built. Flying boats again served the Navy admirably in a variety of missions. But the circumstances that had made this type of aircraft so indispensable were changing. Airfields were being constructed around the world. Large land-based planes, aircraft carriers, and submarines were capable of many of the same tasks. Eventually, these factors would make flying boats obsolete. One of the most unusual stories in the history of the American flying boat concerns the mammoth H-4 Hercules. In 1942, the well-known industrialist Howard Hughes began work on an ambitious project for the US military. German U-boats were taking an enormous toll on Allied supply routes. Flying boats, which were the most effective defense against these attacks, were often destroyed while being shipped overseas in crates before ever being put into service. A massive aircraft able to transport great quantities of troops and material non-stop over the Atlantic was seen as a possible remedy. The ever-confident Hughes vowed to deliver such a plane. The entire structure of the H-4 was built of laminated wood to conserve aluminium for other wartime uses. It was powered by 8 3,000 horsepower engines and had a wingspan of 106 meters. No larger aeroplane has ever been built. 3 H-4s were ordered, but by 1944, not one had been completed, and the project's entire budget had already been spent. Criticism of Hughes was mounting, as many doubted the enormous plane could ever fly. Detractors labelled the H-4 the Spruce Goose and the Flying Lumberyard. The military decided to cut its losses and cancel the project. But President Roosevelt stepped in and requested that one aircraft be completed. In the face of continuing controversy, the H-4 was readied for a public demonstration of its handling on the water. On November 2nd, 1947, Hughes climbed into the pilot's seat and taxied the giant flying boat before the assembled onlookers. Then, without warning, the Spruce Goose rose off the water and flew, taking the crowd completely by surprise. After a short flight of about a mile, the H-4 touched down and headed back for port. There was some speculation that Hughes himself was as startled as anyone upon becoming airborne that day. In any case, he considered himself vindicated by the performance. But this was to be the H-4's only flight. For reasons unknown, Hughes never flew the plane again. It was placed in storage and then on exhibit, and is currently waiting to be exhibited again. Another large flying boat with a rather more successful career was the Martin Mars, which was originally intended as a long-range patrol bomber. Even before receiving the prototype in 1943, the Navy changed the Mars mission to troop and cargo transport. The prototype, designated the XPB-2M, performed impressively in this capacity. This massive plane was over 40 meters long, had a 67-meter wingspan and a range in excess of 7,350 kilometers. It was more than equal to the long San Francisco to Hawaii leg of the supply route to those fighting far across the Pacific. In January 1945, Martin was contracted for 20 more Mars planes, but this order was soon reduced to 6 at the end of the war. The production models were designated JRMs and were used by the Navy in the Pacific from 1945 to 1956. These were the largest flying boats to ever perform regular military operations. After their retirement from Navy service, 4 Mars flying boats were bought by a group of Canadian logging companies and converted to water bombers for fighting forest fires. Incredibly, 2 of these planes are still performing this job today, more than 50 years after their first flight. The Grumman Albatross was far smaller than the Mars planes, but comparably long-lived. These amphibious twin-engined aircraft were produced in great numbers from 1947 to 1964. They had a range of up to 4,500 kilometers and were used for transport and rescue work by the Navy and Air Force until the mid-1970s. The Albatross proved extremely valuable for search and rescue and was used in this capacity by the Coast Guard until 1983. The Martin P-5M Marlin entered production in 1951. Similar in design to the PBM Mariner, the Marlin also had a gull wing and the same wingspan. But its longer fuselage improved handling on the water, and it was outfitted with more powerful engines. The Marlin also introduced hydro flaps and reversible propellers for increased water maneuverability. Designed for anti-submarine warfare, the P-5's armament could include torpedoes, bombs, depth charges, mines, and rockets. The large, distinctive nose housed radar equipment. The Navy made use of these planes until the late 1960s. Marlin crews spent countless hours patrolling the oceans looking for Soviet submarines. Anti-sub tactics were practiced continuously with simulated attacks made on American vessels. A submarine would have the definite advantage in any real encounter, and the Cold War required constant preparedness. Contacts with actual Soviet subs were extremely rare, but the Marlins carried out their searches of vast areas of empty ocean year after year as the first line of defense against possible enemy intrusion.